The Renters' Rights Bill had its second reading in the House of Lords, and there were lots of speeches from peers that supported landlords. Is this a new dawn? Is the Renters' Rights Bill going to change? And I then get on to the big questions. What can the House of Lords actually do? And this isn't the sort of clickbait content that you see everywhere. I go through the constitutional law aspects, but don't worry, I keep it light so that you have realistic expectations of what might happen and what might not happen. Who am I? I'm Suzanne Smith, lawyer turned landlord, and I run the independentlandlord.com website and this YouTube channel. You can read the latest on what's happening with the Renters' Rights Bill in this blog post here, theindependentlandlord.com/RRB-latest. Right, first of all, what did we learn in the second reading? Well, when I was watching the debate, I was very focused on what the minister, Baroness Taylor, said and didn't say. Well, she used a lot of the same phrases as Matthew Pennycook and is even persisting with the fiction that we'll be benefiting from a simpler system.
Both landlords and tenants will benefit from a simpler system.
That's wrong. It's not simple. And that's a fact. It's not. Baroness Taylor was very clear that abolishing fixed-term tenancies is very important. And I can't see any U-turns on that. Let's see what she says.
To be clear, it is a core principle of this bill and this government's firm belief that there is no place for fixed terms in the future assured tenancy system.
And as for student, she just referred to the new ground 4A, giving lots of reasons about why it should stay as it is for full-time students and not other types of students. And she did not specifically say that they were looking for an exception for students for anything else.
On the issues around student, a number of noble lords raised the issue about ground 4A being too narrow. The government recognises the impact the new tenancy system will have. While we believe the ground covers the majority of the market, there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, and we think it's reasonable that a ground will apply to full-time students in larger house share situations. Students studying part-time alongside work or living in smaller properties, as I said before, should enjoy the same security as other tenants.
So what happens next? Well, the bill will go to a committee of the full House of Lords and they'll go through it line by line. There will be a lot of discussion and there'll be a lot of comments in social media about this amendment and that amendment. But the only amendments that really count are the government amendments and the ones that the government support. Which brings me neatly on to, can the House of Lords actually stop the bill? Well, I'll have a look at the data. You'll see that the Conservatives are the largest party in the House of Lords. Well, what happens if the House of Lords passes amendments that the government doesn't support? Towards the end of the debate, Baroness Taylor said this.
The Renters' Rights Bill honours our government's manifesto commitment to overhaul the regulation of the private rented sector.
You'll have seen that she refers to the election manifesto. Now, here's what Labour said in their election manifesto. First of all, that they'll overhaul the regulation of the private rented sector. And that's a big word, overhaul. So why am I going over old history of the election manifesto? Why is it important? Well, let me introduce you to the 5th Marquess of Salisbury, a fine-looking chap. And here he is in Winston Churchill's War Cabinet in 1940. The first Labour government was elected after the war, and there was a constitutional crisis because the House of Lords was overwhelmingly Conservative and the House of Commons, the government, was Labour. And so what the Marquess of Salisbury did, well, he worked with others to come up with an approach that said that the House of Lords would not vote down or pass wrecking amendments of a manifesto bill. Now, the Renters' Rights Bill is a manifesto bill, and so people can huff and puff as much as they like in the House of Lords, but when it comes down to it, the government will be able to push it through. So you might say, well, what's the point of the House of Lords if the government can do what they like anyway? Well, they do have persuasive power, and if we're being realistic, they might be able to change some of the minor details around the edges, but they're not going to change the abolition of Section 21 or some of the other key features of the bill, because that's in the manifesto. So unless the government changes its mind, which I think is unlikely to on this bill, then there's nothing ultimately that the House of Lords can do. So what did the minister say about implementation? The key date for us now is when's it all going to come into effect. And when I say all going to come into effect, I mean the new tenancy system. A lot of the other stuff will come in later. But the really important thing is this new tenancy system, no fixed term tenancies, etc., all moving over to periodic tenancies. Well, what did she say about this?
And we will provide sufficient notice ahead of implementation.
Well, it's not very informative. So what does sufficient notice mean? I mean, I don't think that's 2 months. I think sufficient notice would be a year or at least 6 months. But the government's not said anything. And rather frustratingly, nobody in the House of Lords actually pinned her down and said, when is this going to come into effect? Now, I've written to my MP today and have said, tell us when it's going to, how many months after royal assent when it comes into effect, because we need to plan for this. And there's a lot to do, particularly if you're a student landlord and an HMO landlord. So people are talking about loopholes. And I advise you to exercise caution here, because unless you've got a lot of money and you like spending time with lawyers, be very careful about trying to get around the rules. It's just far simpler to suck it up and comply. And if you don't like it, well, sell up or do something else with your properties, do short-term lets. But, that comes with a whole heap of issues in itself. And in terms of how to prepare, you can have a look at this video here. I go through it all. I break it down in a risk-based approach. And really the upshot is to get ready for this new tenancy system of periodic tenancies. And if you'd like more information, I have a whole free training course here on YouTube. And you can also subscribe to this channel because I'm putting out new content all the time. And you can subscribe to my newsletter here. See you soon.